Hey friends, welcome to the Miss Ink Stamps YouTube channel. I'm really excited to be bringing you a project featuring some of the new stamp sets from the latest Miss Ink Stamps June release in the Magical Collection. This is the stamp set called Baddies, and we have quite a few images here to choose from, as well as lots of really great sentiments that really help build up more of this magical collection. I've stamped my bad dad, I've stamped my you-know-who bad guy, and I've stamped my very evil bad cousin, I'm going to call her, as well as this lovely little pet snake. I stamped all of them in black ink and colored them in with my Oh Hoo Hoo art markers and used the coordinating dies to cut them out. I also took the mirror from the Heart's Desire stamp set and I stamped and colored it and die cut it out. I really wanted it to look like a stone archway, even though this is not, intended to be an archway, it's a mirror, but I just thought it was a really good way to use this stamp set for the scene that I'm building up in this box card. I have a box card die. If you're going to recreate this card, please just use your favorite one. And I've die cut it in some dark blue cardstock. This particular one has a nice little shimmer to it, and I think it's going to turn out really pretty. I have some white cardstock that I like to use for ink blending, and I'm going to use some repositionable tape just to adhere it down to my glass mat. And then I'm going to use my magnets to help me keep my stencil in place on top of this white piece of cardstock. But first, I'm going to lay down a nice good helping of Lost Shadow Distress ink, just using a blender brush right onto my white paper. I'm going to make sure I cover pretty much the whole area where the stencil will overlap. There's a little bit of areas where it does have some white showing through, but that's not a big deal. I just wanted I guess you could say the part where we're masking using this cobblestone stencil. Stone Wall Stencil. I wanted to make sure that the parts in between all of the different stones will have some color in it. So I laid down that gray color, and now I'm bringing in Pumice Stone Distress Oxide, as this will sit nicely on top of the Distress ink, and I'm going to completely fill in all of my stones. Once I'm happy with the color coverage, I'm going to bring in Black Soot Distress Oxide as well, and I'm just going to randomly add some of this color. I want my stones to look like they have different shades and texture, so just kind of making a funny little pattern across the stencil with this black ink. And then I'm going to grab the Distress ink version of Black Soot, add a little water, and then add some splatter. Again, really trying to make these stones look like actual stones with lots of texture and dimension. I'm also going to add some of this black metallic watercolor, and just like I did with the Distress ink, just added some water and using my paintbrush to pick up the color and splattering it through my stencil. I love a good stencil reveal, so let's take a look at how this background turned out. I think it looks so cool, and it actually does have a bit of a snakeskin feel to it. After I cleaned up my desk, I'm going to work on adding some vellum on my archway. So I'm going to adhere it to the back side. I just have a scrap piece here, so I'm using a pencil to know where I need to make my cuts on this piece of vellum to glue to the back of my archway. Now, in the book version of the story, this stone archway, I believe, has like a black kind of curtain sheet, but in the movie version it has this very like transparent looking kind of portal, I guess you could say. So that's the look I'm going for with this particular this particular way of adding vellum to the back side of my stone archway. So I added some double-sided adhesive around the opening, peeled off the release paper, and glued down the piece of vellum that I trimmed to fit perfectly on the back side. I'm going to start assembling my box card. For this particular one, I die cut a front piece so it closes it up and makes a box, as well as two additional pieces that I usually call shelves because it's what I glue my images to, like they're sitting on a shelf. So I'm using some double-sided adhesive and some wet glue to glue this box card together. I decided to glue my first shelf pretty close to the front of the card. I really wanted the character I'm going to place on this first piece to be very close to the front, and then I'm going to glue the second shelf a little bit further back That way it seems like the other two bad guys that I'm going to put behind him will seem like they're, further back, but definitely supporting him in his stand. So once I have all three of those glued on, I'm going to grab that stenciled background I made because it's pretty much dry by now, and I'm going to work on die cutting different pieces to be able to glue into this box card. So I have the left side ready to go, and here you could see my background. I'm going to just grab my towel and just kind of dab up any excess water or ink that's on there so I don't get my dies too dirty when I run them through my die cut machine. This particular die set has a backing, it has the shelf pieces and the two side pieces, and I'm going to try and fit as much as I can onto this piece of cardstock so I can get all the pieces that I need for my box card. And because I am limited on space, I'm going to make sure to use some repositionable tape to make sure that those dies do not move as I run them through my die cut machine, because I'm going to try and fit as much as I can onto this piece to be able to get all the pieces I need out of this stenciled background. So once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and start gluing them onto the box card. So I'm going to start with the background of this arch, and again, just going to glue this down. I decided to use wet glue because my paper was curling a little bit from all of the torture I did to it with the ink and the splattering, the stenciling, everything. So I thought the wet glue would just help make sure that it had enough time to, I can kind of wiggle it, is where I needed it to go on my piece, and then it would secure nicely. So after I did the background arch, I'm going to do my shelf pieces. So I'm gluing one to the back shelf, and then I will glue the next one to the second shelf. And finally, I'll add the last piece that I cut out to the front of my box card. So now that I have all those pieces in, I'm going to close up my box card. So just like I did on the left, I'm going to glue these tabs to the right. I like to use some strong double-sided adhesive tape and a little bit of wet glue just to make sure this box card is nice and secure, because they do tend to get moved and bent around a lot as it is an interactive card, and I want to make sure that my card doesn't just break open or pop open when my card receiver receives it. So I'm going to close it up, but I always like to make sure I fold my box card the other way, because sometimes if I'm using super sturdy cardstock, it doesn't fall correctly, I guess you could say. So I was having a hard time bending it the other way. So thanks to that wet glue, I was able to pull up the tabs real quick and realign them while it was folded the other way. So that way I know no matter which way I fold the box card, it will stay closed and connected. I'm adding in these little side pieces. Again, just really loving this stone wall. I think it's creating such a cool look, and it's going to look really great with my stone archway. So now that my box card is all assembled, let's get back to these wonderful images from Miss Ink Stamps. And I'm going to attach my stone archway to the back of my box card, so on that arch backing. And I'm going to use a little bit of foam adhesive. This card is already pretty thick as I'm using sturdy pieces of cardstock and have lots of layers here because it's a box card, but a little foam, didn't hurt anybody. So I'm adding some foam strips just to where my stone arch will make contact with the back of my box card. So this is going to be a little bit taller of a box card. I may need to make my own envelope for it, but I'm really loving how this is turning out. And I'm going to do my best to center this archway to the back of the box card. So using my grid mat here, just with a little help, making sure it's about as straight and centered as I can get it. And I think it looks really cool with that vellum, and you can kind of see that stone wall behind it through the vellum. So I just think it's really giving the effect that I was wanting. Next, I'm going to glue down my character. So I have my bad guy dad here, and he's only going to overlap on my shelf piece just a little bit. So I'm only adding some wet glue where I need him to stick to the shelf piece. And, thanks to using wet glue, it gives me a chance to make sure he's placed exactly where I want him before I move on to the next character, which is my bad guy cousin. And she's going to be glued on the same shelf piece as my dad, and I will secure her down the same way. So just some wet glue on the back side of her where she will attach to that shelf piece. And then my bad guy, who, our main villain here, just like the other two characters, I'm going to add some adhesive to the bottom where his robes are. But this time he's going to go on the next shelf up. So again, I wanted him to be kind of the front and center bad guy on this box card. So he's going to go on the first shelf piece. Finally, I'm going to add my snake on the front, but this is also where I wanted to add my sentiment. So I'm going to grab that Baddies Stamp Set again, and I'm going through the different stamps. I already kind of had an idea of what I wanted to use, but just before I stamped it, I was going through all of the different stamp options. But I'm going to grab some white cardstock and some dark blue ink because I thought it would match really well with the cardstock that I chose for the card base. And I'm going to go ahead and ink up that sentiment that says, let's get together and or make bad choices. And I'm going to just go ahead and cut that out with a pair of scissors and also a paper cutter. So my sentiment is, just in that little white rectangle of paper. If I cut it right around the sentiment. And I'm gluing that to the upper left-hand corner of the front part of my box card. And then using that same foam adhesive that I did for my archway, I'm going to add some foam adhesive behind my snake. I find the best way to be able to maneuver double-sided foam strips like this is to peel off the release paper so it's sticky on both sides, and it just really allows you to bend and turn the foam adhesive very easily. So I trimmed it down just below the head of the snake, since the head of the snake pops up over the top of the box card. So here's a final look at these baddies on this box card with a stenciled background using lots of cool stamps and stencils from Miss Ink Stamps. A lot of S's in that sentence. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that you're inspired to use the new stamps and products within the magical collection from Miss Ink Stamps. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.